The G20 was formed out of a need for diverse representation on the world stage. It's comprised of 20 countries with some of the largest and fastest growing economies. Well, 19 countries plus the European Union. Together, they represent 2/3 of the global population and 80% of its economy. This powerful membership ensures that the G20 can have meaningful impacts on the variety of issues that affect and are affected by economic activity worldwide. However, G20 membership still leaves out 2.6 billion people from roughly 150 nations. That could be a problem, but the G20 recognizes their responsibility. We have a responsibility to all citizens. We will remain engaged with the international community as a whole and make sure that the interests of countries at all stages of development are taken into account. Nor can we ignore the far-reaching impact of our actions. To this end, we will listen carefully to all institutions and countries that are not in the group. Who are these countries and institutions the G20 listens to? The G20 presidency, which rotates between member countries each year, invites a limited number of guest nations and regional organizations to participate. These invitations are in high demand, as guests have a chance to represent their interests, negotiate for their own policy recommendations, and gain more access to information being shared in topic-specific working groups. Invitations are sent to countries of economic or geographic importance. The Saudi G20 presidency in 2020 invited 4 nations: Spain, a permanent guest of the G20, Singapore, Switzerland, and Jordan. Since South Africa is the only African member nation of the G20, 55 African nations are regularly represented by the chairs of the African Union and the new Partnership for Africa's Development. The Association of Southeast Asian Nations, representing 560 million people, attends each year, and the 2020 G20 has also invited the United Arab Emirates as the chair of the Gulf Cooperation Council. Guest countries and regional organizations are able to attend working groups and the annual summit. They also interact with G20 members and advocate for their interests, influencing decisions being made that will impact their constituents. The G20 also listens to voices that represent specific sectors of society, rather than nations or regions. Global governance institutions, such as the UN, World Trade Organization, and International Labor Organization, provide the G20 with guidance. These institutions are involved with the G20 throughout the year. They offer much-needed data analyses and expertise regarding policy recommendations and provide evidence-based research for the G20 to consider as they debate and arrive at a consensus. Quite often, the G20 produces communiques to express their agreement with other institutions' resolutions. Expressing agreement via communiques bolsters the efforts of all institutions involved. It creates continuity between them and helps them coordinate their efforts to meet their objectives. Finally, the G20 also receives input from various G20 engagement groups, which represent specific sectors of civil society, such as young people, workers, and women. These groups are made up of independent and non-governmental delegates who develop and advocate policy recommendations which they share with the G20. The G20 strives to be both inclusive and agile. Too many voices might make it difficult to take action, but ignoring diverse perspectives would undermine its mission. The inclusion of guest nations, regional representatives, global organizations, and engagement groups all help the G20 to factor many different voices into their discussions and decisions. They may only represent 2/3 of the globe, but the G20 understands that, in our interconnected world, their actions impact everyone.